Black CEO humiliated by white heiress over cake. Minutes later, she collapses a 12B Dynasty. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's get back to the story. You seriously thought that was for you? The words cracked through the quiet evening like a slap. Sharp, echoing publicly. The dessert counter at Eclat Patisserie, Manhattan's most exclusive glass-walled, gold-trimmed bakery, fell into a hush so complete you could hear the hum of the refrigerators. Crystal cases glowed with pastries shaped like jewels. Everything smelled of citrus glaze and warm vanilla. Yet all of that sweetness soured instantly. At the center of the room, a white heiress in a cream cashmere coat, Emily Harrington. Her family name was stitched into half the country's old money museums and 3 Ivy League buildings. In her manicured hand, a slice of the bakery's signature imperial velvet cake, a confection so rare it was limited to 5 servings per day. 5. She held it high like a trophy, and across from her stood the target of her smirk, a black woman in a navy blue suit, posture calm, expression unreadable. Her name, though no one here recognized it yet, was Dr. Aisha Thompson. Emily's laugh rang out again, brittle as broken glass. "Oh, sweetheart, this cake sells out before noon. You don't just walk in and expect they'll hand you the last slice." A few customers chuckled softly, the kind of laughter people use to align themselves with power. A barista froze with a tray in hand. Another pretended to wipe a counter while watching from the corner of his eye. Someone near the back whispered, "Why would she even try? That cake costs more than some people's rent." Emily leaned in closer. "Perhaps next time try a bakery more in your range." Her voice didn't rise. She didn't need volume. Her tone did all the slicing. Aisha didn't respond. She simply studied the heiress with steady, timeless composure. Her hands remained loose at her sides. Her breathing never shifted. That unsettled Emily more than any argument could have. She scoffed. "Oh, don't look at me like that. It's not personal. It's just this place has standards." Her friends laughed on cue. Then Aisha finally spoke. Calm, almost gentle. "I didn't ask for special treatment, just fairness." Emily's smile tightened. Fairness is such a flexible word, but look on the bright side. At least you got to see the cake. She lifted the velvet slice as if to toast her own cruelty. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Aisha. The room was shifting, not loudly, but unmistakably. The fluorescent gold light above flickered, then steadied as if holding its breath. Behind Emily, a server approached with a nervous expression. "Ma'am, that slice was actually reserved." Emily rolled her eyes. "Obviously, for me, it wasn't reserved for you." The server's voice trembled, but his courage didn't. Emily turned sharply. "Excuse me?" Aisha lowered her gaze to the cake, not with hunger, but with a kind of quiet calculation. A mental click, a line crossed, a change only she could feel. Emily scoffed again. "Look, if she wants a picture of the cake or something, maybe let her take one before I—" The server interrupted, voice barely above a whisper. "Ma'am." It was reserved by the building's majority stakeholder. Emily stiffened. Her eyes darted to the logo engraved on the gold-trimmed glass. Eclat, a Harrington Enterprises property. She smirked. "Well, then it's definitely for me." The server looked at Aisha, then bowed and placed the thin porcelain plate directly in front of her. A silence fell so heavy it felt like gravity had tripled. Emily's smile died. "What are you doing?" The server swallowed. "She's the majority stakeholder." The air fractured cleanly, loudly, like ice under sudden weight. Emily stared at Aisha. "What? What kind of joke is this?" Aisha finally lifted her eyes, and the entire room felt as if it had stepped backward from something vast. "No joke," Aisha said quietly. "Just accountability." Emily staggered back a half step, her confidence draining like color from a photograph. Who are you?" Aisha didn't raise her voice. She didn't need a performance. She simply said, "The woman who owns the dynasty you're standing on." And in that single sentence, the fate of a 12B empire began to tilt slowly, silently, inevitably toward collapse. For a moment, the patisserie forgot how to breathe. Emily's painted smile trembled at the edges. The confidence she wore like inherited perfume, evaporating into the still air. The plate in front of Aisha glowed under the chandelier lights. A simple slice of velvet cake that now felt like a verdict. Aisha didn't touch it. She didn't need to. She lifted her gaze, letting the silence settle until even the espresso machine behind the counter quieted, as if listening. "Majority stakeholder," Emily whispered, voice thin. "That's impossible. My family owns." Aisha tilted her head slightly. Ownership shifts, sometimes quietly, sometimes overnight. A few customers exchanged glances. Someone near the window muttered, "Is this real?" Another pulled out his phone, but lowered it again after catching Aisha's look. Not threatening, just sovereign. Emily's cheeks flushed red. "My father didn't sell anything. He would have told me." Aisha held her gaze. "Are you sure about that?" The words hit harder than any raised voice ever could. Across the shop, the server who'd placed the plate stepped back, worried he had stepped into a private war he could not comprehend. The other employees watched from behind pastry towers, pretending to reorganize trays while absorbed in every breath of the confrontation. Emily shook her head, laughing too loudly. "You're lying. Just because someone bowed to you, it doesn't mean anything. Anyone can pretend." Aisha didn't argue. Instead, she reached into her blazer pocket and set down a small matte black card. No logo, no name, just a thin silver strip along the top. The room reacted before Emily did. A banker near the door whispered, "Is that a Stratus access credential?" His companion hissed. "Those don't even circulate publicly," another added. "You can't buy one. You're appointed." Emily frowned at the card. "What is that supposed to be?" Aisha's voice softened to something that felt like truth wrapped in steel. Proof that you should pay attention before you decide who belongs where. Emily's confidence flickered. "My father controls the Harrington enterprises, the properties, the trusts, everything. He would never—" Aisha cut her off. Her phone lit up. Then another sound. Her friend's phone. Then a third. A fourth. The entire cluster of Heiress-adjacent socialites froze, staring as notifications cascaded across their screens like a digital storm. Emily frowned and unlocked her phone. Her face drained of color instantly. "What?" she whispered. "No. No, this can't be." Aisha already knew what she was seeing. She didn't rush her. A headline flashed across Emily's trembling hands. "Harrington Enterprises enters forced restructuring. Majority shares acquired by Thompson Capital Holdings." A second notification. Emergency board meeting called "Assets Under Review." A third. CEO Richard Harrington unavailable for comment. Emily's throat clicked as she tried to swallow. You bought us?" The words were barely breath. Aisha didn't smile. She simply answered. Months ago. The bakery didn't erupt. It didn't gasp. It absorbed the revelation like an earthquake beneath polished marble, silent but destabilizing everything above it. Emily stumbled back into a glass case. A server rushed, steadying it before it shattered. "My father wouldn't hide this from me," she whispered. Aisha's expression softened, not with pity, with understanding earned through battles Emily had never imagined. "Sometimes," Aisha said, "the people you trust assume they can keep you safe by keeping you uninformed." Emily blinked rapidly, breaths shallow. "You ruined us," she whispered. "No," Aisha corrected gently. "I inherited your damage. You just didn't know how close your dynasty already was to breaking." The room pulsed with a new tension. Not triumph, not fear, recognition. Aisha tapped the untouched slice of cake. A gesture as light as a falling feather. "Empires don't collapse over dessert," she said. "They collapse when arrogance forgets humility." Emily wavered, the last of her defiance draining away. And for the first time, she understood. The woman she had mocked, the woman she had dismissed, the woman she believed did not belong, was the one holding the power her family thought could never slip from their hands. The patisserie's front door chimed softly as a pair of customers slipped out, unable to withstand the charged air any longer. Outside, the summer breeze tugged at their coats backward, but inside the tension was still heavy, deliberate, like a theater, where the next line would decide the fate of the cast. Emily steadied herself against the marble counter. Her friends hovered helplessly, unsure whether to comfort her or distance themselves. No one wanted to be on the wrong side of a falling dynasty. Aisha remained exactly where she stood, centered, composed, untouched by the chaos swirling around her. The velvet cake between them had become less a dessert and more a symbol of assumptions, of arrogance, of the thin line between entitlement and collapse. Emily's voice cracked. "You blindsided us, my father. He wouldn't let this happen. He's still the CEO." Aisha's gaze didn't waver. "Entitle?" "Yes." Emily looked up sharply. "What does that mean?" "It means," Aisha said gently, "that titles are ornaments. Power is substance, and substance follows ownership." Emily pressed a trembling hand to her forehead. "You don't understand. Our board has been stable for decades. No one could take control without silence." Aisha finished. "Without secrecy? Without your father making deals in rooms he never intended you to enter?" That landed like a monolith. A man sitting near the window muttered, "This feels like watching a building collapse in slow motion." Aisha ignored the whispers. Her focus stayed on Emily, not out of cruelty, but out of intention, the kind that doesn't hide behind spectacle. Emily's voice shrank. "Why us? Why my family? You could own anything. Why this?" Aisha inhaled softly, a breath that carried years of cold boardrooms and quiet calculations. "Because," she said, "your father's debt was a storm waiting for a sky. I didn't create it. I simply refused to pretend it wasn't there." Emily blinked, confused. "Debt? What debt?" she said. "The Harrington expansions were fully funded. He promised." A sudden understanding flashed in her eyes. Promises, the kind that weren't meant to be kept, only spoken to pacify. Aisha saw the realization bloom and continued, her tone still even, still steady. "Your father leveraged properties, trusts, even old museum endowments to keep your brand alive. But the market shifted. Interest ballooned. His partners began to pull away, and in those moments, someone always steps in." Emily shook her head. "But why didn't he tell us?" "Because some men build empires," Aisha said, "and others build illusions." The line hit harder than anything else so far. The heiress's knees nearly buckled, and one of her friends reached out to steady her. Emily's hand snapped back instinctively, not out of pride, but because the truth felt radioactive, Aisha's expression softened. She wasn't there to destroy Emily. She was there to correct what Emily never understood. "You grew up in the light of your family name," Aisha said, "but you never saw the shadows it cast behind you." Emily swallowed hard. "So that's it. You come in, expose whatever you think you've uncovered, and now you own us." Aisha paused. Then she stepped forward, one measured step. Elegant, controlled. "I didn't buy your family," she said quietly. "I bought the consequences of their choices." The bakery went silent again, and it was then, only then, that Emily realized something far worse than losing her dynasty. Her humiliation in the patisserie was not the cause of its collapse. It was simply the first moment she'd been forced to see the truth. Aisha held her gaze for a final beat. "Your world didn't fall because I walked in," she said. "It was already falling. I'm just the first person who didn't pretend otherwise." Emily's breath shuddered. Her friends looked away, and the velvet cake, untouched, sat between them like a quiet prophecy. The patisserie's golden lights flickered once, as if even the bulbs sensed the shift happening in the room. Outside, rain had begun to fall, soft, slow, unhurried. Inside, everything felt suspended, as though reality itself was waiting to see what Aisha Thompson would say next. Emily stood frozen, fingers curled against the marble counter, her breath shallow. The girl who had strutted into the bakery, a vision of inherited entitlement, now looked like someone standing in the doorway of a truth too large to process. Aisha didn't move closer. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't twist the knife. She simply continued. "There's something else you should know." Emily's eyes snapped up, fear mingling with disbelief. "There's more. Your father wasn't just drowning in debt," Aisha said. "He tried to secure one final deal, a massive one, by using assets he no longer fully controlled." A trembling gasp left Emily's lips. "He wouldn't. He couldn't put our legacy at risk like that." Aisha exhaled through her nose, slow and steady. "He did, and he hid those signatures under a shell subsidiary. That's why the board cooperated with the acquisition. They were trying to prevent a total collapse." The words slipped into the room like cool wind through a cracked door. A man near the door muttered, "This is bigger than a bakery scene." One of Emily's friends began to cry quietly, not for the dynasty, but for the sudden, brutal clarity of how fragile privilege can be. Emily's voice splintered. "Why are you telling me this? Why here? Why today?" Aisha finally looked down, not with condescension, but with a strange mix of truth and restraint. "Because the moment you held that cake over me like a symbol of status, I realized something." Emily stared, bracing herself. "You don't know the world you stand on." The heiress blinked, confused. Aisha continued. "Power without awareness isn't power. It's instability. And instability doesn't just break dynasties. It destroys anyone in their path." Emily shook her head, tears starting to gather. "So, this is about punishing me?" "No," Aisha said softly. "It's about showing you the ground beneath you was cracking long before you chose to add cruelty to it." The bakery staff exchanged glances, some ashamed for having laughed earlier, some awed by the calm force unfolding before them. Emily took a shaky step forward. "If you bought everything, if you own everything, then what happens to us now?" That was the question the room had been waiting for. Aisha didn't answer immediately. She let the silence breathe, fill, settle. Then, "That depends on how you move from this moment onward." Emily froze. Aisha's tone remained gentle, yet carried the weight of unshakable truth. "I have no interest in destroying you. Empires fall on their own. I'm here to decide what rises after." Emily wiped quickly at her cheek, as if ashamed to show vulnerability in public. What do you want from me?" she whispered. Aisha studied her carefully. The trembling hands, the fractured confidence, the fear that was finally honest. "I want accountability," Aisha said. "Not from you alone, from the entire Harrington Enterprises. Your father built a reputation large enough to eclipse its damage. That ends now." Emily's breath quivered. "So, we're finished." "No," Aisha replied. "You're finally beginning." The words stunned the room. Emily stared at her, uncomprehending. "Beginning what?" Aisha's eyes softened. "The part where you learn who you are without the shield of a dynasty." The rainfall outside thickened, drifting like slow-motion ash from a burned-out empire. Aisha turned slightly, just enough to signal she was finished with the confrontation for now. But then she paused, looked back, and offered a final truth with a tone so quiet it felt like a mirror being gently lifted. "Humility isn't the opposite of power," she said. "It's what keeps power from consuming everything around it." Emily didn't speak. She couldn't. The world she'd believed indestructible had shifted under her feet, not through violence, not through spectacle, but through revelation. And in the center of the bakery, the untouched slice of velvet cake remained where it had always been, a reminder of what Emily Harrington thought she held and what Aisha Thompson had already taken back. The rainfall outside thickened into a slow gray curtain, muffling the street noise until the entire block felt insulated from the world. Inside the patisserie, the air had cooled, not from the evening creeping in, but from the quiet realization that every person in the room was witnessing the end of something much larger than a public argument. Emily stood motionless, as if any attempt to move might cause her to crack. The heiress, who once commanded attention with the ease of inherited confidence, now struggled simply to keep her breath steady. Aisha turned slightly, as though preparing to leave at last. But the moment she shifted, the bakery doors swung open. A burst of humid air swept in, followed by a man in a charcoal coat, rain dusting his shoulders. His face was flushed with urgency, but when he saw Emily, truly saw her, his expression faltered into something close to dread. It was David Langford, Harrington Enterprises' chief legal officer. Emily's eyes flicked to him. "David?" Her voice quivered. "What are you doing here?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, his gaze shifted to Aisha. Not with anger, but with the reserved caution of a man who knows he's standing in front of someone whose decisions can end careers in a single sentence. He bowed his head slightly. "Dr. Thompson." The room stiffened. Emily stared, horror blooming in her expression. You know her?" David hesitated only a beat. "We've met recently." Aisha didn't acknowledge the introduction. Her posture remained calm, unshaken, a pillar in the center of the unraveling storm. David took a breath. "Emily, there's been a development. Your father is flying back from Zurich earlier than expected." Emily latched onto the words like a lifeline. Good. He'll fix this. He'll explain everything to her. He'll straighten it out." David looked at her with the kind of sympathy that only arrives when hope has already turned hollow. "He can't fix this." Emily blinked. "What are you talking about?" David swallowed, tightening his jaw. "Your father wasn't blindsided by Dr. Thompson's acquisition. He cooperated with it. He negotiated parts of it himself. He signed off on the transition phases months ago." The bakery exhaled in a collective gasp. Emily staggered back a full step. No, that's not true. He told me the restructuring was temporary. He told me nothing was changing." David cut in gently. "He didn't want to scare you or your brother or your mother. The truth is the company was drowning. This acquisition wasn't hostile." He glanced at Aisha. "It was rescue." Emily shook her head violently. No, no, if we were in trouble, why didn't he tell me? Why didn't anyone tell me? Aisha finally spoke, her voice woven with measured stillness. Because when a building is collapsing, you don't warn the chandeliers. You reinforce the foundation. The metaphor landed like stone. Emily looked at her sharply, eyes glistening. Are you calling me decoration? Aisha's tone softened. I'm saying you were protected from the truth, and protection when misused can become a cage. David stepped forward, lowering his voice. Emily, the board is calling for your father's resignation. They want a full leadership transition. Emily stared at him, stunned. Wait, you mean they want her to? David didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Aisha's presence answered for him. The heiress's breaths grew frantic, her fingers curled tightly against her chest, clutching something that wasn't her status, maybe, or the familiar certainty of her world. Aisha stepped closer, stopping at a respectful distance. My goal isn't to erase your family, she said quietly. But what your father built can't survive without accountability. It needs restructuring. It needs transparency. And it needs leadership that understands consequence. Emily choked on a disbelieving laugh. So what? You're going to take my father's place? Aisha held her gaze, unblinking. I'm going to take responsibility where your father refused to. Emily's breathing quickened. This is everything we have. Everything we are. Aisha's eyes lowered briefly to the untouched slice of cake between them. Then it's time, she said, to learn who you are without it. Another silence washed over the bakery, but this time it wasn't shock. It was the beginning of acceptance. Even if Emily wasn't ready to feel it yet, the patisserie felt smaller now, as if the walls themselves had leaned in to witness the unraveling of a dynasty. Customers who had intended only to buy pastries now stood frozen, caught in the orbit of a truth unfolding with the slow, crushing gravity of a landslide. Emily's breath quivered. He wouldn't step down. Not willingly. David exhaled, weary. It's not about willingness anymore. It's necessity. The auditors found discrepancies, layers of them, unreported liabilities, deferred losses, and a trail of misclassified transfers that can't be ignored. Emily stared at him. Transfers? What transfers? David hesitated. He looked as though he had aged 10 years in the span of one conversation. Emily, he said softly, your father mortgaged parts of the estate to cover his private dealings, the ones he kept off the books. Her hand flew to her mouth. No, he promised. He said everything he did was for the company. Aisha spoke gently. People often confuse sacrifice with secrecy. Your father hid the truth because he feared what the truth would require. Emily shook her head, tears spilling now. He lied to me. Aisha didn't correct her because the silence between them already had. David cleared his throat, paling. The board wants emergency stabilization. They're preparing documents for a transitional authority figure. Emily's head snapped up. Who? David looked at Aisha. Emily followed his gaze, dread solidifying inside her. No, she whispered. No, she can't. She's an outsider. She's not a Harrington. Aisha regarded her with a calm that wasn't pride, but precision. Legacy doesn't determine leadership. Competence does. Emily's voice cracked. But you don't know us. You don't know our world. I know the consequences of your world, Aisha said, her tone soft but irrevocable. I've spent a lifetime studying them. Emily's friends backed farther away, as though proximity to her might pull them into the collapse. The hum of the refrigerators was the only sound filling the tense quiet. Aisha stepped around the velvet cake, still untouched, a fragile monument to the moment that started all of this, and moved closer to the window. Raindrops drifted past the glass in slow spirals, settling on the sidewalk like scattered truths descending from the sky. "Emily," Aisha said, not turning back yet, "I am not here because I want to tear down what your family built." The heiress wiped at her cheeks, voice trembling. "Then why are you here?" Aisha turned, her expression almost solemn. "Because what your father built was already collapsing, and someone had to choose whether to let it fall on the innocent or rebuild it before it shattered everyone beneath it." David nodded, backing her silently. Emily's breaths came quick and shallow. "Innocent. Innocent. People look at us like we're villains." Aisha held her gaze. "Because arrogance speaks louder than truth. But the people affected by your family's decisions don't care about the Harrington name. They care about the consequences." Emily's voice rose, desperation cracking through. "Then tell me what happens now? To my father, to my mother, to me?" And there it was. Not entitlement, not cruelty, just fear. Raw, human, unshielded. Aisha approached slowly, each step measured. "What happens now depends on how you face what's coming," she said. "Your father will answer to the board. Your mother will be asked to step away from the foundations she oversaw. And you," Emily's lips trembled. "And me?" Aisha's answer came with a gentleness that felt like the first warm breath of spring through winter glass. "You can either inherit the consequences," she said, "or you can learn to inherit the truth." Emily blinked rapidly, trying to swallow the weight of it. Aisha continued, lowering her voice. "You've lived in the glow of a name. Now you have the chance to stand in the light of your own choices." For the first time, Emily didn't argue. She didn't defend. She didn't deny. She simply stood there, breathing the truth that had finally found her. And as the silence settled once more, the velvet cake between them remained untouched, a symbol not of loss, but of the moment arrogance gave way to awakening. For a long, fragile moment, no one moved. The room held its breath the way people do when they realize a story they thought they understood has suddenly changed shape. The rain outside thickened, clinging to the windows in soft, intricate patterns, fragile, temporary, much like the Harrington Dynasty itself. Emily wiped her cheeks again, this time slower, more grounded. Her hands were trembling, but she didn't try to hide them. Maybe for the first time in her life, she wasn't trying to perform strength. She was simply trying to find it. Aisha stepped back toward the counter, her movements deliberate, unhurried. She wasn't looming over Emily, wasn't pressing the knife deeper. She was letting gravity do the work. Truth has a way of settling on its own. David shifted awkwardly, his coat still half-zipped, as if the damp outside had clung to him when he entered. He looked at Aisha, then at Emily, then back again, recognition dawning slowly on his features. He wasn't watching a takeover anymore. He was watching a transition. The bakery owner, who had been pretending to polish a tray of eclairs for the past 20 minutes, finally dared to speak. "Dr. Thompson, is there anything we should prepare? I mean, given the circumstances?" His voice trailed off when Emily flinched at the word circumstances. Aisha shook her head gently. "No, nothing changes here today." The owner nodded quickly, relieved. But the staff knew something unspoken. When someone like Aisha Thompson said, "Not today," it meant the future had already begun shifting under their feet. Emily stared down at the marble floor, her voice small. "I don't understand how everything fell apart without me noticing." Aisha approached, not close enough to intimidate, but close enough to anchor the conversation in truth. "Because people protected you from the truth," she said softly. "Your father, your advisors, your name, even the world." Emily swallowed. But why am I not fragile? No, Aisha agreed. You're not fragile, but privilege often mistakes shielding for love. Emily's eyes flicked upward, filled with something raw. And you? What do you mistake it for? Aisha paused, a rare break in her composure, as though considering how much she was willing to reveal. I mistake it, she said finally, for distance. Distance from the reality that shaped me. Distance from the consequences I had no choice but to confront. Distance from understanding what it means to build something without a safety net. David's brows knitted. He knew parts of Aisha's portfolio, her companies, her innovations. He knew the headlines, but he had never heard her speak about herself. Not like this. Emily's voice dropped to a whisper. So what happens next when you take control? Aisha exhaled quietly. I rebuild the Harrington Enterprises, not in your father's image, not in mine, but in the image of what it should have been. How? Emily asked, voice trembling between fear and curiosity. With transparency, Aisha said, with ethics, with accountability, and with leadership that knows the cost of failure. Emily blinked, confused. You mean you're replacing everyone? No, Aisha replied. I'm re-evaluating everyone. Then Aisha said something that stunned even David. And that includes you. Emily's breath froze. Me? You've never held a real position in your family's company, Aisha said. Not because you weren't capable, but because you were never given structure or responsibility. You were given spectacle. Emily's lips parted. No argument came. Aisha continued. If you're willing, I can give you a place in the new foundation of this company. But it won't be glamorous, it won't be effortless, and it won't be shielded. David stepped forward, startled. Dr. Thompson, you're offering her a role. Aisha nodded once. Under strict supervision, under real expectations, under the same conditions as anyone else. Emily stared as if the world had tilted again, but differently this time, in a direction she didn't know whether to fear or follow. You mean I get to learn the business? She asked. Aisha's tone remained calm. You get to learn who you are in the business. A shuddered breath escaped Emily. And if I fail? Then you fail, Aisha said. But at least it will be your failure. Not something inherited, not something avoided, not something hidden. The bakery was silent again. But this silence felt different. Not destruction, reorientation. Emily's voice cracked. My father will hate this. He may, Aisha replied. But this is no longer about his comfort. It's about the company's survival and your growth. Emily's eyes glistened. And if I say no? Aisha didn't hesitate. Then you walk away from the empire you nearly lost without ever understanding it. Emily looked down at the velvet cake, the symbol of everything she'd weaponized without understanding the cost. This time she didn't see sweetness. She saw truth. Soft on the outside, dense at the core, and suddenly very, very real. She lifted her head, voice steady for the first time. What do I have to do? Aisha's expression shifted, not into warmth, but into respect. Show up, she said, every day, ready to learn, ready to face the parts of your life that were kept from you, ready to earn what was handed to you. Emily nodded, her breath finally evening out. I can do that. Aisha studied her, then nodded once. Approval, but cautious. We'll see. And as the rain continued its quiet descent outside the window, the moment settled over the patisserie. The heiress who had mocked a stranger over cake might, for the first time in her life, be learning what it meant to build something real. The air inside the patisserie shifted subtly, almost imperceptibly, as if the building itself were adjusting to a new balance of power. Not the sharp, crushing force that had shattered Emily's illusions moments earlier, but something quieter, something that felt like the first breath after a long-held grief. Emily stood straighter now, though her eyes were still swollen, her hands still trembling. Not from fear anymore, but from the weight of possibility, the kind that wasn't handed down like inheritance, but forged from accountability. David exhaled in relief, though even he didn't seem fully prepared for the direction this storm was turning. Aisha watched the young heiress carefully, her posture steady, her presence still commanding, but no longer confrontational. A different energy now emanated from her, not softness, but a kind of earned restraint, the version of power that doesn't need to be loud to be understood. Emily's voice was quiet, but firm. If I'm going to learn, where do I start? Aisha stepped towards the window, the rainfall behind her creating a halo of gray around her silhouette. With the truth, she said. Emily swallowed. About my father? About your family? Aisha corrected. About your company, about everything you were never told and everything you never asked. Emily flinched, the words landing with the sting of clarity, but she didn't look away. David fidgeted beside them. Dr. Thompson, if Emily joins the transition program, she'll need security clearance, access to restricted files, training, and… Aisha interrupted without turning. She'll get what she earns. Not more, not less. David nodded quickly. Understood. Emily watched them both, a flicker of realization passing across her face. This wasn't just an offer. It was a summons to a world she had technically always belonged to, but had never actually entered. The bakery owner, still clutching the tray of eclairs, cleared his throat gently. Dr. Thompson. Miss Harrington, perhaps you'd like a room in the back. More privacy? Aisha shook her head. No. What happens here is meant to be witnessed. The owner nodded, stepping back. Customers bowed their heads slightly, giving them space without moving. Even the air felt like it was listening. Emily drew a deep, shaky breath. Do you hate me? Aisha finally turned, her eyes steady, unreadable. No. Emily blinked, surprised. Aisha continued. I don't hate people who make mistakes. I hate systems that allow those mistakes to become someone else's burden. A soft gasp came from someone near the door. Emily absorbed the words like medicine. Bitter, but necessary. Aisha stepped closer just enough to shift the atmosphere. You humiliated me today? Yes. But I didn't respond because you embarrassed me. Her voice lowered. I responded because your behavior is a reflection of a dynasty that has never been held accountable. Emily lowered her gaze. I never saw it. I know, Aisha said. That's the real problem, David interjected softly. Dr. Thompson, the board will want to know your final decision. Should I prepare a formal statement? Aisha didn't break eye contact with Emily. Yes. Emily braced herself. Aisha spoke clearly, her voice firm enough to anchor the room. Effective immediately, I am appointing Emily Harrington as a provisional trainee in corporate operations. She will undergo a full 12-month rotational program under my direct supervision and the board's oversight. David nodded, taking mental notes. Emily's eyes widened. Provisional, meaning it's not guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed, Aisha replied, especially not power. David hesitated. And the press, Dr. Thompson, what do we tell them? Aisha's eyes flickered with a quiet storm. Tell them the Harrington Enterprises is entering a new chapter, one defined by responsibility, not entitlement. Emily's throat tightened. Aisha wasn't finished. And tell them, she added, that legacy will no longer outweigh merit. The bakery murmured with awe. Emily felt something unexpected swell inside her. Not pride, not relief, but resolve. A trembling newborn resolve. Aisha turned slightly, her tone lowering. "There is one condition." Emily straightened. "Anything. You apologize." Emily blinked, startled. "To you?" Aisha shook her head slowly. "To everyone in this room who watched you treat a stranger like they were beneath you." A slow hush fell. Emily's pulse hammered. She looked around at the faces, the servers, the customers, the barista who had pretended not to hear her cruelty earlier. And suddenly she saw herself, through their eyes, entitled, unaware, small. Her voice trembled. I don't know if I can say the right thing." Aisha softened just a fraction. "Say the true thing." Emily inhaled deeply, her chin lifted, not in arrogance but in effort. "I'm sorry," she whispered, then steadied herself. "I'm sorry for how I spoke, for assuming I understood someone's worth just by looking at them, for thinking this bakery or this cake or anything in my world made me better than anyone in it." The room remained silent, but something warm flickered through it. Emily swallowed. "I was wrong." Aisha watched her carefully, not judging, evaluating. Emily drew one final breath. "I want to change. I don't know how yet, but I will." The silence finally broke. Not with applause, not with praise, but with the humble quiet of people witnessing a shift, a fall becoming a step. Aisha gave a single nod, small but unmistakably approving. "Then we begin." And the rain outside continued falling, as if washing the world clean enough for what came next. The rainfall outside had thickened into a quiet gray curtain, blanketing the street in a glow that made the entire city look like it had been reset. A clean slate, waiting for new footsteps. Inside the patisserie, the warmth of the lights pressed against the glass, holding back evening's hush, as if the room itself understood it had witnessed something worth protecting. Emily's apology still lingered in the air, fragile, vulnerable, but real. For the first time since the confrontation began, she seemed smaller, not from shame, but from the unburdening of a truth she had never carried before. Aisha stepped back, giving the moment space to settle. She didn't bask in triumph. Her posture held no arrogance. She looked almost thoughtful, like a woman who had seen too many versions of this ending: collapse, confrontation, consequence, and knew the real work always began after the dust settled. David cleared his throat, his voice a respectful murmur. "Dr. Thompson, shall I inform the board of your decision regarding the provisional training?" Aisha nodded once. "Yes, and request a review committee. Emily's evaluation will be independent." Emily stiffened for a moment, then exhaled. This was accountability, not punishment, a path, not a performance. The bakery owner approached timidly, wringing his apron between his hands. "Dr. Thompson, Miss Harrington, would either of you like the cake boxed?" "It's, on the house," he swallowed nervously. "Or, well, on you, I suppose." There was a ripple of uneasy laughter, but Aisha simply glanced at the velvet cake and shook her head gently. "No," she said. "Leave it." Emily stared at the slice, the catalyst of everything, the symbol of what she'd once used as a weapon. Its glossy red layers shimmered under the warm lights, innocent in its sweetness, deadly in the entitlement it had exposed. "May I?" Emily's voice was small as she gestured to the cake. Aisha raised a brow. "If you want it." Emily hesitated, then shook her head. "I don't. Not like this." Aisha respected that. David checked his phone discreetly, then looked up with a tightened expression. "Dr. Thompson, the press has already caught wind of the restructuring. Financial channels are requesting statements, and Harrington shareholders want an emergency briefing tonight." Aisha nodded. "Prepare one. I'll address them after I leave here." Emily stared at her. "You're coming with me to the headquarters." Aisha held her gaze. "Not with you. Ahead of you." The distinction was clear. Emily lowered her eyes, accepting it. Aisha moved towards the door. Customers instinctively stepped aside, not in fear, but in respect, the kind earned not by spectacle, but by unmistakable power wielded with clarity. David followed, pausing beside Emily. "I'll arrange the onboarding procedures. There will be interviews, assessments." Emily nodded. "I'll be there." He blinked, surprised at the steadiness of her tone. "Good." Aisha reached the door, but something made her stop mid-step. She turned back, her silhouette framed by the rain-lit window, a figure shaped by purpose rather than performance. "Emily," she said. The heiress looked up. Aisha's eyes softened with something unexpected, not forgiveness, not pity, but recognition, the kind offered from one woman who had built herself to another who was about to begin the same climb. "There's a reason I didn't let your words define today," Aisha said, "and it's not because of your name." Emily's voice trembled. "Then why?" "Because I remember what it felt like," Aisha replied. "To be judged before I ever spoke, to be underestimated in rooms I later came to own, to walk into places that weren't designed for me and claim them anyway." The entire bakery seemed to still. Aisha continued, her tone low, steady, and cinematic in its weight. "I didn't rise to power by shouting. I rose by refusing to shrink." Emily blinked quickly, the words landing deeper than any reprimand could. "And you," Aisha said, "have the chance to rise the same way, but not as a Harrington, as Emily." The young woman's breath hitched. David looked between them, recognition dawning. This was more than business. This was transformation. Aisha offered a final truth. Build something worth claiming and do it with humility. That's how dynasties truly begin. Emily nodded slowly, as if internalizing each syllable. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not giving up on me." Aisha's expression remained steady. "I haven't given you anything yet. You'll earn what comes." Emily accepted that without protest, and perhaps that alone was the first sign of change. Aisha opened the door. A gust of humid air swept in, lifting the ends of her coat like the wings of a bird preparing to take flight. She stepped out onto the rain-covered sidewalk, her heels leaving defined imprints on the fresh, wet ground. Precise, confident, unshakable. David hurried after her, phone already pressed to his ear, muttering updates to the board. Emily remained inside, staring at the door as it slowly closed behind the black CEO, who had just dismantled and redefined her world in the span of an evening. Not with rage, not with spectacle, with truth. She turned back to the bakery, to the cake, to the customers who had witnessed everything. And as they watched her, not with judgment, but with cautious curiosity, Emily Harrington took a slow, deliberate breath. A breath heavy with endings, a breath trembling with beginnings, a breath that marked the first moment she stood, not collapsing under the weight of a 12B legacy, but as a woman preparing to build her own. Outside, Aisha Thompson walked into the swirling rain, a force of calm power moving toward a boardroom that would soon learn what accountability truly sounded like. Inside, Emily closed her eyes, and for the first time in her life, she understood why humility wasn't weakness. It was the foundation of something far stronger.